Hey, how's it going, everybody? Today I'm going to be reviewing Bullet Train, and I had a really fun time watching this movie. Going into this movie, number one, I was watching it because I love Brad Pitt. I think he's good in just about every movie he's in. David Leitch directs this movie, and I really liked the way he did Deadpool 2, and it just looked like a fun movie. And this is exactly what this movie is. It's a very fun movie. Now, I do want to say, if you're going into this movie for some like serious action movie, maybe you think that there's going to be a few comedic jokes, but you're really just kind of wanting more of a grounded sort of action movie with good fight choreography, like John Wick, for instance. Like, let's say that's what you're heading into this movie for. You're going into this movie with the wrong expectations. This movie is really over the top in a good way. So you got to go into this movie expecting that there are some things that happen that if you're not in the right mood to go and watch this movie, you're probably going to roll your eyes and maybe even have a bad time. But this movie, at the end of the day, is just a really fun movie. Number one, the action. This movie is obviously an action movie, and the action is done very, very well. You can see exactly what's going on. The fights are choreographed well, the way the shots are framed and everything is done well, and it is violence. If you love violence and if you love blood, because there's plenty of violence and blood in this movie, you're definitely going to love the action in this movie. To go along with the great action in this movie, you also have a great cast and great characters in this movie, specifically characters Tangerine and Lemon, who are played by Aaron Taylor Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry. Those two right there, Tangerine and Lemon, they have a fantastic chemistry in this movie, and just about every scene that they're in, they're absolutely great. There's a fun scene in this movie when they're arguing about how many people they exactly shot, and there's this whole flashback scene. The way it's done is rather well. Really, the only really sort of complaints I can really have about this movie, because the action and the characters are absolutely great, and the humor does work for the most part, but there are sort of segments into this movie where I feel like the humor, in a way, it just wasn't landing, and I feel like everybody in my audience kind of felt the same way. There were some duds here and there, and mostly in the first act. The first act, I will say, is a little bit messy in this movie, specifically the first 10 minutes. It kind of seems all over the place, and then you're almost kind of getting like whiplash, like, okay, what exactly is going on here? But when the movie finally settles in, about 15 to 20 minutes in, and especially once the second act really begins, you really start to get into this movie and you really start to enjoy the ride. It clocks in at just over 2 hours long, and at that point, since some of the humor and everything in the beginning, it doesn't always land, and it kind of feels like a bit repetitive at times. I will say I feel like this movie probably could have been a little bit shorter. If it was at least like 15 minutes shorter, it probably could have even been like a little bit tighter of a story and a little bit better paced that way. But at the end of the day, this is just a fun action movie, and it's a movie that I definitely recommend everybody to see, because we see a lot of action movies come out these days, which is just nothing, or so many of them are just they're shot so terribly. I think of like Snake Eyes that was released like last summer, where the camera's all shaky and everything. And this is just a movie where whenever the action's going on, you can see exactly what's going on. It's choreographed well. The music is really cool, and I mean, you're on a bullet train. It's basically an all one location thing, and there's twists and turns, and you got characters who you actually care about. And so whenever something happens to a character, whenever we feel like something's going to happen to a character, we want them to pull through, and we get all that with Bullet Train. And at the end of the day, it's just a really fun action movie. It's fun to go in. Just go in there with the right mindset. Don't go into it expecting something like a Die Hard, for instance, or whatever. It's much more over the top than any of that. There's some scenes in this movie that you got to be in the right mindset for. But once you go into the right mindset of, hey, listen, I'm just wanting to go see some people fight. I want to see some stuff blow up. I want to see some good action. You're gonna like this movie.